There is a common misconception that if you pull back, they will feel the loss and come running after you. But in reality, that strategy backfires more often than not. When you create distance, you are not triggering their pursuit instinct. You are handing them exactly what they want, which is a reason to walk away without guilt. It gives them the justification they have been subconsciously looking for to fade out completely. And here is the irony. The approach that actually works feels so contrary to everything we believe about attraction that most people never even attempt it. They dismiss it as being too gentle, too straightforward, or too vulnerable. But it is precisely that counterintuitive move that catches an avoidant person off guard, stops their retreat, and makes them genuinely curious about you. By the time we are done, you will have a clear, actionable strategy to implement. Before we dive into the details, take a second to engage with this. If you are hoping for a reunion, type the word "back" in the comments below to signal your intention. Also, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because the insights I am about to share are the kind of deep psychological tools that typically take people years of trial and error to uncover on their own. Now let us get into the heart of the matter. Think about the avoidant person currently on your mind. Perhaps it is an ex who drifted away, or someone you are still involved with who constantly creates distance whenever emotional closeness begins to surface. Maybe they turned cold overnight without warning, leaving you completely blindsided and questioning your every move. You have likely spent countless hours staring at your phone, mentally dissecting past conversations, desperately searching for the moment things took a turn. The most frustrating part of this entire dynamic is that you probably did absolutely nothing wrong. That is the painful reality of dealing with avoidant attachment. Their behavior is rarely a reflection of your worth or your actions. It is a reflection of their internal programming, a survival mechanism designed to shield them from the perceived threat of emotional vulnerability. They have conditioned themselves to flee when intimacy starts to feel suffocating. However, what most relationship advice fails to mention is that this programming is not permanent. You are not powerless in this situation. There is no need for begging, for pretending to be unaffected, or for playing manipulative games like the silent treatment, hoping they will crack. There is a more effective, compassionate approach available to you. It is a method that respects both your dignity and their defenses, and I call it the soft contact method. When you apply this approach correctly, something almost magical begins to unfold. The avoidant individual who had been backing away starts to experience a feeling that is rare for them in romantic dynamics: safety. And that sense of security is the master key that unlocks everything. So let's rewind and start from the foundation. Let's explore the root of avoidant behavior, because once you truly grasp the mechanics behind their flight response, you will see exactly why this method resonates so deeply with them. Avoidant people are not unfeeling robots. They are not devoid of emotion or incapable of love. In fact, many of them are incredibly sensitive, deeply intuitive, and profoundly emotional individuals. They feel things intensely, often more so than the average person. However, somewhere along the line, typically during their formative years, they internalized a painful lesson: that emotional closeness inevitably leads to hurt, that depending on others results in letdown, and that vulnerability is an open invitation for rejection or criticism. They built their defenses not because they reject connection, but because they crave it so desperately that the fear of losing it becomes paralyzing. Deep within their nervous system, intimacy is mislabeled as a threat. So what happens when you express interest in someone wired this way? When you send frequent messages, or declare your feelings prematurely, or make them indispensable indispensable to your happiness? Their internal alarm system blares loudly. It screams warnings of impending pain, of being overwhelmed, of losing autonomy. So they instinctively retreat. They become distant, unresponsive, and suddenly consumed by other obligations. And you are left bewildered, wondering what went wrong when everything seemed so promising just days earlier. Now, this is the critical juncture where most people make a significant error, and it is completely understandable because it feels like the natural thing to do. You sense the distance and you instinctively try to close the gap. You reach out more, you seek reassurance, you attempt to solve the problem, You offer verbal affirmations, hoping your honesty will dismantle their barriers. But for an avoidant person, this response validates their deepest fear. It confirms that you are indeed a threat to their independence, that you require more emotional energy than they can provide. Consequently, they withdraw even further. Alternatively, you might try the opposite approach that conventional wisdom often suggests: complete silence, playing hard to get, disappearing entirely. While some space can be beneficial, cold, calculated silence designed to provoke their pursuit often fails miserably. An avoidant person will simply relish that freedom, use it to decompress and rationalize the distance, convincing themselves they are better off alone. Before you realize it, the connection dissipates into nothing. But there is a middle ground. That is where soft contact enters the picture, and it is crucial to understand that this is not a deceptive tactic or a psychological game. It is an authentic, humane approach rooted in genuine understanding. Soft contact is essentially a communication style that leaves the door wide open without putting any strain on the hinges. It is showing up with genuine warmth, but without the heavy undertone of desperation. This approach is specifically calibrated to harmonize with an avoidant person's internal wiring rather than constantly triggering their defenses. The core principle is simple yet profound. Avoidant individuals do not actually flee from connection itself. They flee from the weight of obligation. They run from the overwhelming sensation that someone depends on them in a way they feel ill-equipped to handle. They retreat from the suffocating pressure of expectations. So when you deliberately remove that heaviness, when you engage in a manner that feels light, authentic, and completely free of needy energy, you effectively disarm their internal alarm system. That is the moment they begin to relax. Their curiosity starts to override their instinct to escape, and they find themselves wondering about you instead of running in the opposite direction. Let me break down the actual process for you now into actionable steps you can implement immediately. Step 1 is what I refer to as the clean pause. Before you even think about reaching out, you need to give yourself some genuine time and space. I am not talking about a calculated, strategic silence where you are counting down the days. I mean a real pause where you redirect your focus entirely onto your own life. Fill your days with meaningful activities, surround yourself with people who energize you, and invest in things that genuinely make you feel good about who you are. This serves two critical purposes. First, it fundamentally shifts your energetic state. When you eventually do reach out from a place of authentic okayness rather than anxious longing, that quality comes through in every word and every nuance of your message. Avoidant individuals are incredibly perceptive when it comes to emotional subtext. They can detect neediness through a simple text. Second, this pause creates a void where your presence used to be. Over time, if the connection held any real significance, they will begin to notice that absence and feel the gap you have left behind. The appropriate length of this pause varies depending on your specific situation. For a casual dynamic, where they suddenly backed off, a week or two might serve as a solid baseline. For a deeper, longer-term relationship, you may want to allow yourself more time. However, the exact number of days matters far less than what you do with that time. Are you genuinely working on yourself and finding peace? Or are you simply enduring the days, counting down the hours until you can make contact again? Your outreach will land completely differently depending on which of these two mindsets you embody. Step 2 involves crafting the actual soft contact message, and this is where the method truly succeeds or fails. Most people, even those who successfully manage the pause, undermine all their efforts with a poorly constructed message. Let me clarify what soft contact looks like and, just as importantly, what it absolutely does not look like. It is not saying, "Hey, I have been thinking about you a lot," because that instantly applies pressure and signals that your focus remained on them during the break. It is not asking, "I miss you, are you okay?" as that shifts the burden of your emotional state onto them. It is definitely not a lengthy, emotionally charged midnight confession pouring out your hopes and fears. That would be equivalent to sprinting directly at someone who is already skittish and trying to escape. Instead, the approach is far more subtle and effective, and I will walk you through exactly how to construct it. Their immediate reaction will be to sidestep anything that feels heavy. So what does soft contact actually look like in practice? It is something small, something authentic, something entirely disconnected from the relationship itself, and rooted instead in who they are as an individual. It could be sharing a moment that genuinely reminded you of them, not in a romantic, loaded way, but in a simple, human way. For instance, you might say, "Hey, I randomly walked past that cafe we talked about and ended up going in. You were absolutely right. It is amazing. That is light. It is real. It is warm. It asks nothing of them. It does not demand a reply or carry any emotional weight. It simply communicates, I am still here. I thought of you. And it is no big deal." Alternatively, it might tap into a shared interest you both enjoy, whether it is a particular show, music genre, or food. You send something small connected to that, not with the subtext of, "This made me miss you," but just as a brief, natural share, the kind you would send to a good friend. The tone is everything here. It needs to feel relaxed and unhurried, as if you have a full life and simply happen to think of them in the middle of living it. One crucial aspect of the soft contact message is that it should not require a response. I do not mean you should explicitly say, "No need to reply," because that actually creates a different kind of pressure disguised as understanding. Rather, the message itself should feel complete on its own. It should not end with a question that demands an answer or leave them on a cliffhanger that makes them feel obligated. It should simply be a moment of warmth they can receive without owing you anything in return. When you remove that expectation, something interesting happens. Most people actually want to respond because the pressure is gone, because they can engage without feeling that engagement implies commitment. For an avoidant person, that sensation of being able to connect without feeling trapped is one of the most attractive things you can offer them. Step 3 is what I call holding the line emotionally. And this is where many people stumble because the soft contact message works. They send something light and genuine, the avoidant person actually replies, and suddenly all that pent-up emotion comes flooding back. They want to pour everything out, to demand answers, to have the big conversation about what went wrong and where things stand. I completely understand that impulse. When someone you care about reappears, every instinct screams to address it now. But with an avoidant person, that is precisely the moment to restrain yourself. The conversation they are having with you right now is casual and light. They are testing the waters, checking to see if it is safe. They are determining if you are still the same heavy presence they pulled away from, or if something has shifted. The instant you turn a light exchange into an intense emotional conversation, you have answered their question, and the answer is that nothing has changed. So what do you do instead? You match their energy. You keep things light and enjoyable. You let them be the version of themselves that shows up easily without walls because the stakes feel low. You laugh, you share, you remain interesting and genuine and present, and you resist with everything you have the urge to bring up the past, the future, or the state of things between you. Because right now, this moment is doing more work than any heavy conversation could. It is building evidence within them, evidence that being around you feels good, that you are not going to chase them, corner them, or make them feel guilty. The more of that evidence they collect, the more they will want to keep coming back for more. Step 4 is what I call the elevation point, and this is the part that transforms the soft contact method from a simple reconnection tool into something that actually shifts the dynamic long term. The elevation point occurs when, after a few positive exchanges and some rebuilt warmth, you do something completely unexpected for an avoidant person. You show them that you have standards, not aggressively or confrontationally, but in a quiet, confident, self-respecting way that communicates, "I like you, and I also know what I want." For example, if they go warm and then pull back again, you do not chase or ask why. You simply continue living your life and let the silence speak for itself. Or if they reach out and suggest getting together in a vague, non-committal way, you respond with warmth, but also bring clarity. You might say something like, "Sounds good. I am free Thursday evening if you want to lock something in." You are not demanding commitment. You are simply someone who respects their own time enough to make plans rather than waiting around on a maybe. This matters enormously to an avoidant person because most of the people who pursue them eventually abandon their own sense of self in the process. They become so focused on the avoidant that they lose their own groundedness, and the avoidant senses this, which makes them feel more powerful in the dynamic, and ironically makes them want to run more, not less. But when you hold on to yourself, when you show them you have a life and standards and will not collapse into them, something in the avoidant person's nervous system shifts. They stop seeing you as a threat to their independence and start seeing you as someone worth being around, someone who will not consume them, someone who is actually safe to get close to. Here is the almost poetic part. The very qualities that make someone attractive to an avoidant person, the groundedness, the self-possession, the sense that you are complete on your own, are often the qualities they were too busy chasing to cultivate because they were busy chasing the avoidant. Those are the things that create real attraction, not the pleading, not the strategic silence, not the games, just genuine wholeness. The beautiful thing about the soft contact method is that it is built on that foundation. It forces you to do the inner work, the clean pause, the genuine okayness, the holding the line emotionally. All of it requires you to actually be whole, not just seem whole, but genuinely be it. And as you do that work, something funny happens. You realize that whether or not they come back matters a little less, not because you stopped caring about them, but because you started caring about yourself just as much. Now let us talk about what happens after the elevation point. If you have followed the method carefully, there are a few ways this can unfold. The first is that they start showing up more consistently. The messages become more frequent, they start suggesting things to do together, they begin opening up a little, and they start to feel like the person you originally connected with. Maybe even more so because now they feel safe. They know you are not going to swallow them whole. This is the outcome the method is designed to create. And when it happens, your job is to let it. Let them come forward without rushing it. Do not suddenly switch from soft contact to intense relationship conversations. Let them set the pace for a while. Reciprocate with warmth, be present, be real. And over time, as trust builds, you can introduce more depth, more vulnerability, more of the real conversation, but do it gradually, in a way that always leaves them feeling like they have room to breathe. The second way it can go is that they respond here and there, but never quite commit. They stay in that in-between space, warm but distant, interested but unavailable. And here is where you need to be honest with yourself. How long are you willing to wait in that in-between space? How much of your emotional energy are you giving to someone who cannot decide if they want to be in your life? Because soft contact is powerful, but it is not a magic spell. It cannot override someone's deep unwillingness to change. It can create the conditions for an avoidant person to feel safe enough to come forward, but it cannot drag them forward. Some avoidant people, the ones who have never done any work on themselves, the ones so deeply entrenched in their patterns that any closeness genuinely feels unbearable, some of them will never fully come forward no matter what you do. And you have to be willing to accept that, not as a failure, not as a reflection of your worth, but as information about who they are and what they are capable of at this point in their lives. That acceptance is ultimately the most freeing part of the entire process. The third possible outcome is that they come back with surprising intensity. After a period of quiet, they suddenly become fully invested, texting constantly, making plans, and displaying all the warmth and interest they previously seemed to hide. This scenario is actually the trickiest to navigate because it is easy to mistake a burst of enthusiasm for a lasting transformation in their attachment style. However, an avoidant person who has not done their own internal work will often fall into a repetitive cycle. They draw close, feel overwhelmed, and retreat. You give them space, they miss you, and they approach again. If you are not careful, you can find yourself trapped in a loop that feels like a relationship, but is actually just the push and pull of an unresolved pattern. So when they return with such energy, enjoy it, be warm and present, but also pay close attention to consistency over time. Enthusiasm in the moment is lovely, but it is sustained consistency that reveals whether real change has occurred. Now, let us address something that rarely gets discussed in these conversations. What about your own emotions throughout this entire process? Everything I have described demands a level of emotional regulation that is genuinely challenging. Holding back when every instinct screams to lean in, remaining light when you feel heavy, maintaining your standards when you are terrified of pushing them away. It is not easy, and it is completely okay to admit that. In fact, acknowledging how difficult this is for you, even if only to yourself, is an essential part of the journey. Because part of why you are so deeply invested in this person, part of why their withdrawal affects you so profoundly, might have something to do with your own attachment patterns as well. I say this not to add another burden to your shoulders, but because understanding your own tendencies is what will ultimately set you free. Not just from this particular situation, but from the pattern of repeatedly finding yourself in similar dynamics. If you discover that you are consistently drawn to avoidant individuals, if you tend to feel most intensely about people who are not fully available, that is worth exploring. Often what feels like chemistry is actually the familiarity of an old pattern, where someone's unavailability mirrors a figure from your past who taught you that love requires effort, earning, and waiting. Once that realization truly lands, everything shifts. You stop viewing the avoidant person as someone you need to win over and start seeing them as a human being with their own wounds, fears, and capacity for growth or lack thereof. You begin making choices based on what is genuinely good for you, not just what feels familiar. So let me circle back to where we started. You want to know how to bring someone back, how to make an avoidant person stop running and start leaning in. The answer is both simpler and more difficult than most people anticipate. You stop trying to make them do anything at all. You stop managing their emotions and start honoring your own. You show up with warmth but without desperation. You communicate presence without obligation. You hold your standards not as a power play, but as an authentic expression of self-respect. And you do the inner work to genuinely be okay, not just appear to be, so that the energy you bring into every interaction is the energy of someone who is truly whole. That is what soft contact is at its core. It is not a technique layered over anxiety. It is an expression of someone who has done the work to be genuinely centered and who chooses from that place of centeredness to extend warmth to another person without making that warmth contingent on a particular response. When an avoidant person, who is accustomed to people either chasing them or playing games, encounters that kind of presence, it stops them in their tracks. It makes them feel something they rarely feel with someone who is attracted to them. It makes them feel safe. And safety for an avoidant person is the most powerful force in existence, because what they have always wanted beneath all the running, the walls, and the distance is exactly what everyone wants: to be close to someone without losing themselves, to be loved without being consumed. What you are ultimately offering them is the chance to choose connection because it genuinely feels good, not because someone is making them feel guilty for their distance. And when you become that person, when you become the one who offers closeness without weight, they stop running away from you. Instead, they start moving toward you. Not because you manipulated them or played some perfect game, but because you became someone worth moving toward. You became a person who embodies safety and warmth without demanding anything in return, and that is an incredibly rare and magnetic quality. Now here is the final thought I want to leave with you. Do this work for yourself first, not for them. Yes, it might bring them back. Yes, it might transform the dynamic in profound ways. But the person who benefits most from this journey is you, because you are going to carry the version of yourself that emerges from this experience into every single relationship you will ever have. That grounded, self-aware, genuinely whole version of you is the one that attracts not only avoidant individuals who are finally ready to confront their fears, but also genuinely secure, available, loving people who are ready to meet you exactly where you are. So start there. Start with yourself. Take the clean pause, not as a strategy, but for your own peace of mind. Send the soft contact, not from a place of desperation, but from genuine warmth. Hold the line emotionally, not to appear detached, but because you actually have a life worth living. Show your standards not as a game, but because you respect yourself enough to know what you deserve. And then let the outcome be whatever it is going to be. Because when you come from that place, when you are truly rooted in yourself, the outcome almost always surprises you in the best possible way. You might find that they come back, or you might find that you no longer need them to. Either way, you win.